Lawmakers are introducing a bill to ban the president, vice president, and members of Congress from trading prediction market contracts after controversial bets on global events put companies like Kalshi and Polymarket under scrutiny. Joining us now is former Congressman Sean Maloney. He is the CEO of the Coalition for Prediction Markets, and
I love this guy.
As we've all, you do?
I love this
That's
guy.
Nice.
See? We should stop right here.
We should. You guys want to leave or something? CNBC and Kalshi have a commercial. Not that there's anything wrong with that. They have a commercial relationship that includes a CNBC minority investment. It's good to see you.
Good to be here.
Your major point, I think, is a lot of these things that raise an eyebrow are offshore markets, that there's already some regulation for polymarketing.
Thank you for noticing.
Yeah.
Because I listened to Chris Christie sit on this set and say that an onshore responsible regulated company brought you the Maduro trade, and that's BS. That is an offshore player, that is not subject to U.S. regulation. And the reason we don't have those kind of abuses on the guys doing it the right way here is because you know who it was. Because we ban insider trading already, and we've got know your customer rules. And so there's an important conversation going on, and these are serious issues, and the coalition exists to be part of that conversation.
You also are of the opinion that it's not like a casino. It kind of looks like betting, but you're saying it's actually a derivative and that it can be used to hedge different things. You actually must have killed you, but you point out that Trump probably had a pretty good idea he was going to win from the prediction markets, where on the polls that looked like he.
Well, as a political nerd, I will tell you, it is unusual that Zoran Mamdani and Donald Trump are both bragging about their Kalshi odds, right? And everybody I know running for office sends me their Kalshi odds now, not a poll. So, and you were quoting Kalshi data on this program a few minutes ago, right? Why? You guys use that data because it's very cool forecasting technology, and we know the markets. Can derive interesting information, but I tell you what, I do think there are serious issues that we need to contend with, and we applaud lawmakers for getting in the conversation.
When you say serious issues, what are the issues that you think need to be contended with?
I think it's really good that the CFTC has started the process of doing a rulemaking in this space. I think there are novel aspects of these markets, even though, as you point out, markets have always been accused of being a form of gambling, and speculating has always been seen as gambling. We know, however, that speculation provides liquidity in markets. What we want is good rules, good regulation, transparency.
But let's just understand what that means. So I can see how this could work in the context of politics, meaning understanding an election. And I think there's probably great value in that, and to the degree that it's pretty hard to have inside information in advance of it, that may be something that may make sense in terms of hedging and all the other things you're talking about. The thing that I think we've all talked about at this table is it feels like in this idea that you can bet on anything at any given moment, that it changes people's fiduciary duty, the amount of inside information that can be in the system, that piece of it makes it very complicated when you can bet on what you are about to say, like next.
Yes, I think
if in fact that was a opportunity on, if somebody said, Sean's coming on, and someone could put up a bet about what you're going to say, that could not be a great situation.
Yes, I don't think the world where I'm that important exists, but I appreciate the example. I think but it's a serious question you're asking, and I think this is exactly what I'm talking about, which is that you've got a chairman of CFTC who is the cop on the beat and a good regulator who has said, we're going to do a rulemaking on this. And to the extent that we need to clarify these kinds of issues in these kinds of markets, because some of those contracts are different, even though they're derivative contracts on a financial market where we've got a century of experience regulating them, right? And we understand markets and we understand manipulation. We understand it's wrong to use material non-public information. Insider trading is illegal. It's been illegal. It's going to stay illegal.
You can't co-opt people who don't play by those rules.
I'm sorry?
You can't co-opt people who aren't beholden to those rules. You can do it in the financial markets because every publicly traded company has to follow the rules. Should you be allowed to bet on things where players are never going to have to follow those rules? It's not their responsibility to do it. We used the example before, knowing what's going to happen at the Super Bowl in terms of the Super Bowl halftime show, knowing what's coming next. It's not those people's responsibilities to protect that information. Right. And so therefore, it's very hard to say that there's not some edge that somebody has, and that's not a fair trading market.
Right, and these are novel questions, and you're right to ask them. And my point to you is that we've got an experienced cop on the beat who's going to do a rulemaking process. We support that.
But which piece of it are you advocating for?
For some of these markets.
For example, use the Bad Bunny example. Do you think that people should be able to bet on what is the first song Bad Bunny is going to play at the Super Bowl? Does that seem like a reasonable thing for you or not? Because I assume it's not just that you're asking the CFTC to create some guardrails. I imagine you want them, you have a view about what those guardrails actually look like.
Right, and I have a view on what books you should read and which ones have value and which don't. I'm going to answer your question. We don't generally get in the business of telling human beings what they can transact on and what's interesting to them any more than I would say your book on the market crash is less important than something else.
Bets where whether somebody's going to die or not, whether the Ayatollah is.
We don't allow those transactions on U.S.-based platforms. The CFTC has clear core principles that would prevent that. So no, they should not. However, if you want to understand there are important hedging strategies around a change in government, I think that's a perfectly legitimate thing to hedge, and there are huge economic implications for that. And a responsible company doesn't allow people to transact on death, and that's the right way to go. But on your case, the fact, what I'm trying to tell you is that, you know, we have a referee to call balls and strikes on things like that, and to clarify what people's responsibilities are and what they aren't.
Right, but I assume you are talking to the referee, telling the referee what you think the rules should be. And so what I'm asking you very specifically is, what should the rule, you know, if Taylor Swift's going to have a concert, should her song, whatever she's going to do, or if Brian Armstrong is going to do a conference call and is going to talk about something or not talk about something, should that be something that is permissible to bet on? And I'm not talking about the specifics. I'm talking about the concept of effectively betting on things that are happening in happening outside of maybe the financial markets.
Well, let's take a step back. The reason that millions of Americans are excited about these products, and the reason this network uses Kalshi data, is because your viewers find it useful that when you aggregate that market information with people with skin in the game, you learn important insights. And you may care about the Grammys or not. You may care about the sales of a song or not. Some people clearly do, and they can transact on that. The question,
I think I'm asking you a different question. It's not about who's going to win the Grammys, which might be a fair thing to bet on, assuming that you think that Price Waterhouse or whoever's doing the accounting is not going to share that information prior. But, you know, whoever that musician is that's going to win, what they're going to say during their speech. And I'm asking you, are you saying that what they're going to say during their speech, for example, that kind of thing, would be something you think should be permissible? It sounds like you do.
No, look, what I'm saying is that the market will determine what people want to trade on, and it's the job of a good regulator to say when things cross a line that.
And I'm asking you, are you suggesting that things like that do cross the line or they don't cross the line?
I don't think there's anything wrong with people transacting on things where they have expertise or where they have economic risk they want to hedge. I don't think there's anything wrong with having a derivative-based model that has good federal regulation, because we understand those markets and they work. I think if your point is that I should be picking what's meritorious and what's not, I think it's far better.
It's not meritorious. There's a certain kind of schema where there's a large possibility for inside information to be used to bet on, which is different than other kind of, I put in sort of two different kind of schema. That would be my word.
Well, now he's just using big words, but
even though it's only two syllables.
I mean, I went to a state school, man, but
you know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. We all know what
schema. I mean, all right, look. I'm taking your point seriously, but what I'm telling you is that the way this works best is when companies like Kalshi can offer contracts that their users find useful. And if it's working right, they know there are guardrails and there's a cop on the beat that's enforcing those. And by the way, we have not seen the high publicized abuses that people have heard about on U.S.-based markets that are federally regulated. We see them on offshore platforms where people are acting like cowboys, and that is exactly where you're going to drive people if you don't have good federal regulation here. So my point to you is, your concerns are valid, and some of these questions are new, and we need guidance on some of them from the cop on the beat.
Betting on individual work, that sounds like casino.
It doesn't sound like a derivative.